Fisherman's Post. More fish, more often.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fisherman's Post Saltwater Podcast Series. This episode is titled Cape Lookout, False Albacore. And I'm going to be talking with Captain Tyler Hudgins of Drumroll Charters operating out of Morehead City. And we're going to be covering such areas as when and where to go, finding fish, and then we're going to address light tackle and fly fishing setups and techniques. My name is Gary Hurley of Fisherman's Post. Fisherman's Post has been serving the saltwater fishing community of North Carolina since 2003. We've been bringing you fishing reports, fishing tournaments, fishing schools, membership content, and here in our latest and greatest effort, the Fisherman's Post Saltwater Podcast Series, where we reach out to our captain and guide friends from up and down the coast and ask them to share with us their thoughts, their insights on how to catch more fish more often. And in this endeavor, I'm joined by my podcast co-host, David Harden of Harden Creative Media.
Hey, Gary.
Hey, man.
How's it going?
It's going good.
We're going to talk some false albacore.
Yeah, man, I'm a big fan. Like, maybe some people poo-poo because you can't eat, whatever, man. They are a fun fish to hunt, to catch, all of it. I'm in.
Now, I'll be interested to see if people actually eat the false albacore. I've heard they don't. But there's always people out there that they'll talk about barracuda, like they're going to eat a barracuda. So
I didn't know this show was going to get controversial.
That's right.
No idea.
We're going into the red. We're going into the red.
Sure, you can find someone to eat a false albacore. In fact, I think we even had comments on previous false albacore podcasts, and the answer is whatever. Go ahead and eat it.
Just eat it.
Go ahead. And eat your barracuda too.
That's right. While you're doing it.
And your oyster toadfish. And your lizardfish. Eat them all. Soak them in hot sauce.
That'd be good. Before we get started, though, let's thank some sponsors.
Yeah.
We got Port City Signs and Graphics, Sabrina and the crew, always doing some good work.
Yeah, man. I'm a big fan. Fisherman's Post has used them since Sabrina basically took over the business. In fact, I'll be going this week to pick up one of our leaderboard logos. Man, they print all the logos that we put up on our leaderboard. They actually made the leaderboard itself. So, very dynamic company, great customer service.
They do great quality work too. You can tell how good it is just by looking at the sign. I'll bet you I can throw up a sign and you can tell me whether it was made by Port City Signs and Graphics or made by someone else just by seeing the sign.
Challenge accepted.
Okay, here we go. Let's look at the first one. The first one is an ice cream sign that says, I scream, you scream, the police come, it's awkward.
All right.
That's the first sign.
Okay, sign number one.
Here comes sign number two. And it's a very lovely sign of the Brooklyn Arts Center at St. Andrews on a brick wall.
That does, man. That looks nice. I mean, that is good juxtaposition against the brick wall. I mean, that looks sharp. That looks professional. I'm going to go with sign number two.
Correct, as always.
Oh, fantastic. Who's up? Who else we got?
We have yourboatmoney.com.
Our friend Scott Bradshaw, yourboatmoney.com, and New Coast. Let's see it. Loud graphic.
It is. It sounds good, though.
I think that's by design. Don't advertisers do that to make sure you're paying attention?
I think they do.
Up?
Yes.
Well, good for him. Hey, I reached out to Scott and I said, hey, man, we need a bit and we are going to do, and you're part of this bit. I didn't even tell you you're part of this bit.
Okay, great.
This is a true false. We're going to call it a marine finance fact.
Ooh.
True false. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. When you buy a new boat in North Carolina, North Carolina caps the sales tax at $1,500. They won't charge you more than $1,500 sales tax, no matter how much the boat is.
That doesn't sound right. I'm going to say false.
You are 0-1.
Really?
It's true.
How can they do that? That's amazing.
Well, Scott Bradshaw can tell you all about it.
Well, I need to call him.
Marine finance guy.
Oh, well, that's a fun fact, Gary.
Yeah, and we're going to bring that every episode now.
Okay, good.
All right.
I'll be very educated on marine finance.
So again, marine finance, and if you just had questions, man, he is all about answers. He's all about the service part of that too. Now, who's up? Who's our next?
Our next sponsor is Marine Warehouse Center, as always, doing some good work up on Market Street and other locations too.
They do have other locations. Good for you, David.
Here's a commercial.
Matt with Marine Warehouse, excited to give you guys a huge update. We're now carrying Seaborn and Spider boat line. Of course, we have the newest models of Carolina Skiff, Sailfish, Sea Chaser, and Pan Marine. With over 60 boats in stock at a Wilmington location, let's schedule a sea trial and let's get you on the water today.
They were cranking it.
He wants you to pay attention too.
They're competing now.
They do. Yes, as I try to brand sales, service, and parts, they work on the Fisherman's Post boat, whether it's a project or whether it's maintenance. Man, love Joel and crew, Emmett and Terrell, and even Terrell. I mean, even with the jokes, man, I got to say, like, if it suddenly stopped, I complain about it, but if it suddenly stopped, I would probably miss it.
You would.
You want to hear the latest?
Of course.
Of course you want to hear the latest. So
yes.
Here's what he did. Called me up. I can't remember when. I was going to say dinner time, but the truth is I don't remember when he called me.
That's okay.
He told me that 4 ants rented an apartment with another 6 ants. And now there are 10 ants.
Ooh.
10 ants.
That one hurt.
I got to work on how I say 10 ants.
I don't know.
10 ants.
10 I don't know if that would have helped that one. That one was a little painful, to be honest. It's okay though.
That's fair.
It's all good.
God, I hate Terrell.
If you would like to become a sponsor of this very podcast, just contact the Fisherman's Post office by email or phone.
Yeah, man. And if you are a fan of the podcast and want more or want to support, then remember, the premium membership at Fisherman's Post includes the weekly fishing reports. It also includes podcast early release. You get to see all releases 1 week earlier. And then new this year, the podcast bonus content, where we have a 15-minute conversation with the guest that we don't release publicly. It stays behind the paid wall. So check that out too at fishermanspost.com. And that was smooth, David. We just rolled right through that.
That's right. That's what we do.
Man, we're improving. I like that.
Throwing up graphics on the fly.
You're sharp. All right, but now it is time to bring the guest in. It's time to begin our conversation with Captain Tyler Hudgins of Drumroll Charters. Again, this is going to be Cape Lookout, False Albacore. He's out of Morehead City. Welcome to the show, Tyler.
Hey, gentlemen. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, our pleasure. Always fun talking to you. And looking forward to this conversation because I am sincere, man. I love chasing False Albacore. Such a fun fishery. And I know that you are in the heart of it there at Morehead City, Cape Lookout. But as excited as I am, and as important that False Albacore is to Cape Lookout and Morehead City, no one gets by without the 2 questions. You tell me you're ready for question number 1, I'll give you question number 1.
Let's go.
Tyler Hudgins, Captain Tyler Hudgins, why should we listen to anything you have to say about a False Albacore?
That's a great question. I think I'm glad you're asking it. I think some people might have some different opinions, but personally, I've been working in this fishery my whole life. Was spent the bulk of it chasing these False Albacore here at Cape Lookout, up and down the East Coast, North Carolina, and up and down the East Coast of the United States as they migrate up and down with Drumroll Charters, and also just recreationally as all the way from a little kid to now, and also with do a lot of work with a nonprofit organization that I'm on the board for. That's the Cape Lookout Albacore Foundation. We run the Cape Lookout Albacore and Redfish Festival every year, specifically getting veterans and wounded warriors out on the water so they can learn how to chase these really fun fish.
Man, that might be one of the better answers we've had. I mean, he just nonprofited us.
There were a lot of things.
What can I do? I can't say no. I can't say, man, I forgot what my question number 2 was, and I looked at it and I actually disappointed myself. It was kind of lazy creativity. I looked at False Albacore, so I came up with some true false. So I got 3 true false questions for you. Hopefully they're somewhat interesting. All right, you ready? True false. Scotland's national animal is a unicorn.
I want it to be true, so I'm going to say true.
It is true. And David laughed, and now we are true. So at least that's interesting, right? Now Scotland's national animal is a unicorn. Number 2, President Thomas Jefferson brought the recipe for macaroni and cheese to the U.S. from France.
I'm going to go with false.
That one's true too. How about that? Thomas
Jefferson
from France, macaroni and cheese. That's how it was introduced.
Huh.
Now we
Last one, and then we'll move on to the show. Last one. In a deck of cards, the king has a mustache.
only one king has a mustache.
The kings, all of them. They're all the same. They're red and black and cubs and cubs.
I think that's false. I think not all kings have a mustache in a deck of cards.
Well, none of them do. It's not that all
There
of
you
them. No king has a mustache in the deck of cards, or at least the standard deck of cards. All right. Thank you for humoring me. My true faults as it relates to false albacore. That was my creative stretch. Apparently, I didn't have coffee that day. But now, let's get to the main show. Let's talk about false albacore. And let's begin. I mean, we're releasing this in the fall. We're releasing this in early October. So I'm guessing they happen in the fall, but give us the bigger picture. We're going to focus on the fall, but give me the big picture before we zero in.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to circle back to your intro first. This is one of my favorite fisheries here coming into the fall. The false albacore and the red drum, of course, but specifically the false albacore. Man, they really give me something to look forward to after stepping away from that fast pace of the summer, especially running the charter operation here. We get a lot of our business with that summer boom of people coming to check out our beautiful area and see all it has to experience. So as the heat dies down and some of the pace after Labor Days dies down, we get that. It's almost like the chef's cut of meat. The false albacore fishery was like that for a long time, and it still is in a lot of ways. Where you get a little taste of it to yourself early season, and that's what we're experiencing right now. Actually, normally I would say peak season starts in the first or second week of October, but it can start as early as September, and that's honestly what we've been seeing this year. We've had a little bit of weather roll through just over this weekend. I'm sure that's going to have somewhat of an effect on it, but we are right around the corner from wide open albie season. Primarily, we target them light tackle and fly fishing. I'd love to get more into how we look for them and how we try to catch them. They're a pretty aggressive fish, so you can almost throw just about anything at them. But as we get more and more into the season and they start to get a little more lure shy, so to speak, you have to up your tactics.
All right, I'm gonna hold you off on talking tactics. I'm gonna hold you off on talking gear because I want to know more about these false albacore. So, of course, false albacore don't know a calendar. They don't know that it's October or even September. So what is it? Is it water temperature? Is it following bait? Is it migration? Like, what is it about October that turns it on at Cape Lookout?
Yeah, great question.
Typically turns it on.
Great question. So it's a combination of all of the above. So the bait is going to move as the water temperature changes up and down the coast. That's why you see different false albacore seasons at different times of year in different areas. Like in New England, you see it closer to summertime, and then it's actually the same fish that are going. We're finding more information actually out every year that we used to think it was better stocks of fish, but it really is. At least as far as we can tell, one stock of fish traveling up and down the East Coast all the way from Mexico to Nova Scotia. So as that water temperature changes, the bait moves up and down the coast, and it's very similar to how we see in December, January timeframe when all the pogies get right off the beach here, get right into the hook at Cape Lookout. They do a similar effect here, except it's with the little shiners or the glass minnows. That's what the false albacore are after. So when that bait gets in thick, it starts to, some people call it rain bait. You can see it kind of shimmer on the surface. That gets nice and thick at the Cape right about this time of year through middle of November, and that's what they're chasing.
And there's also a spring fishery too. I mean, not that you can't catch one offshore at any point, but if we're talking about the nearshore guys, target them. And we're going to keep focused on the fall, but just to give people an education, what can you tell them about the spring?
Absolutely. So I think I'd like to first touch on the annual fishery. So false albacore is very prolific in that most larger fish are interested in eating it. It's like the apex bait fish in the ocean. So you're offshore, you can pretty much catch one 365, 24/7, trolling a cedar plug or chasing something bigger. As you mentioned in the spring, it's in our area, it's at least more prominently a bonita fishery, but you will absolutely find the false albacore mixed in with the bonita, and it's a very similar tactic. You're throwing little sting silvers or little clouser fly, anything to match that hatch, look like those glass baits.
All right, man. So let's focus in on fall. So we're early October. And we're heading out now. Someone like you who's seasoned, you have a rhythm, you have a path, you have expectations. But if you're one of the people watching this podcast and they're heading out Beaufort Inlet, Like how do they find fish? Like help them out with as much detail as you can give.
Absolutely. So right out of the gate, I think probably the most useful piece of information I can share is that everybody has the impression, and I'm still guilty of it myself more times than not, but that excitement, that running gun, chasing the bait balls down, chasing the schools of algae down. Immediately, you want to go right to where, depending on what time you go out, depending how busy it is, but most folks want to go right to that big pile of boats or right where they see the action happening. And I would encourage folks first, poke out of the inlet, slow down, survey, look for birds, look for action. One of my favorite things to happen is if you can line it up where they're pulling nets on the shrimp trawl. Obviously, we want to give them plenty of space. We want to be respectful of how they're working. But they bring all kinds of fun stuff to the surface when they're pulling their nets. So you come out of the inlet, take your time, slow down, look at what's around you. You don't have to necessarily put her to the pins heading out to the Cape. You really got a chance to go one way or the other. You could go to Atlantic Beach side, or you could go straight to the Cape, head down towards the shoals. The depending on what the wind's doing more prominently is going to depend on how close to the beach. There's a lot of times where it's blowing northeast for a week straight, and they're going to be pinned right on the backside of the breakers. Makes it a little bit easier to find them, but it also makes it a little bit easier to pin them down. They tend to get busted up into smaller schools, especially when you get a lot of people coming at them at the same time, which is back to my recommendation of take your time, slow down, pick a good pot. I mean, sometimes it's slim pickings. We definitely understand that. But to increase your chances as you pull up on a school, you zing something out there, instead of getting a whiff, you take your time, you get more likely to get that hook up.
All right. Well, I'm still going to back us up, I guess. So, I just want to make sure I understand. So we come out the inlet, and I totally understand about not knee-jerk and going to where the boats are. I think that's good advice. So one question I have, and maybe there's not a good answer to this, but like with some fisheries, and sometimes I'm having this conversation, there'll be some birds that are a better tell than other birds. Is that the case with False Albacore? Or, if you see any bird excited, then that's showtime, potential showtime.
I would say that on average, you're going to be looking for your gulls and your terns to be working more than your pelicans. Your pelicans are your show birds where they make a lot of noise, they splash a lot, but they're not always working the bait balls like you're expecting those terns and the seagulls to. That being said, really any birds, if they're diving, if you see the bait underneath them, that's what you're looking for. Another thing to keep an eye out for birds is even if they aren't actively working, they are more than likely, especially if you have like some gulls or some terns hovering maybe 20-30 yards off of the tops of the waves, they're probably waiting for that bait ball to come back up after they got pushed down by fish or boats. So that's two really telltale ways to read those birds. But to recap your question there, I would say that any birds that are actively working, diving, pushing the bait up, you can see the bait showering out, that's what you're looking for.
Okay, next question would be about bait. And again, this is like, I'm not seeing fish, so I'm trying to read the signs. So in October, outside of Beaufort Inlet, am I going to see rain bait, but I might also see a school of pogies? I might see different types of bait. And if so, does one win or bait is bait? And, of course, there's nervous bait and unnervous bait, but I guess I'm trying to figure out, is there an ideal bait spotter, or is just bait the recipe?
No, that's a great question. So the shiners or the glass minnows, they're going to win every time with the false albacore. That's what they're chasing after. It's not that they won't eat the pogies; they're just they're a larger bait, and so really what they're looking for is that I call it like the anchovy effect, where you get the big swirling ball of glass minnows. If you get really clear water, especially closer to the inlet in the fall, we get that clear water that comes through. You can see the bait ball actually change color as they get pressured. They get kind of like a red flash to them. It's really pretty.
All right, next question. And I just think finding fish is so key. And I have a lot of questions with this because I really do get excited about this fishery. So I think you said if the wind's blowing northeast, and that tends to blow the bait on the beach, and subsequently the fish will be on the beach.
Exactly.
If it hasn't been blowing northeast, and you come out of the inlet, and you're not seeing obvious fish, and maybe you're not even seeing obvious birds or bait, and you think to yourself, all right, I'm either going to head down Atlantic Beach or I'm going to head out to the shoals. So when you're heading out to the shoals, like, is there any math that goes into your line? Like, are you gonna hug the shoreline even if it hasn't been blowing northeast? Or are you going to take a more wider path out there? And part of this conversation comes from, I don't live in Moorhead. So most of my fishing out of Mason Burrow Inlet, I have people saying, yeah, we found them more at 5 miles, or we found them more at 10 miles versus, within 3. I'm just trying to figure out how you get a feel for finding fish if you're not seeing anything and you have to, I guess, search just to find a sign or signs.
Yeah, that's another fantastic question. So I'd say that not to give a cop-out answer, but it widely varies as far as the math that goes behind that decision-making process. So specifically out of Beaufort Inlet, and unless I see something made up right out of the gate, I've got about a 50-50 chance of wanting to go left or right. Left towards the Cape, right down Atlantic Beach. It on a scenario where maybe we just haven't had any wind, or it's been blowing straight out of the south and it's just snotty. More than likely, what I'm going to look for is closer to the horizon, straight out the inlet. I'm going to look for birds at a distance. If I'm not seeing those birds, I'm going to more than likely I'm going to try to get off of the beach a little bit. My fail safe is always, especially in our area, we have a couple of really productive near shore ARs that are within 3 miles. There's probably half a dozen options in either direction. That's always a really good fail safe, in that it's always going to hold life there. You may not have the most consistent schools that pop up. It's not going to be your typical blitzes or your boils, but they'll pop up occasionally. And another option too is if I'm really just not sure what the fish are doing, what the bait's doing, there's no shame or no harm in putting a couple spoons behind the boat and then trolling till I see some action or getting to where I want to go. The logic behind heading up the beach would be that there's pretty much always, especially there on Shack, there's pretty much always life on the backside of the breakers. You're likely to see Spanish working or bluefish. Those are always a day saver in my book. They're fantastic. The bluefish get really fun size that time of year, especially on light tackle. Same thing with the Spanish. They're not monsters, but they're really fun on light gear. My logic behind heading straight to the shoals or even straight to the jetty is going to be looking for structure, looking for more life. I'm going to try to eliminate some of those unknowns instead of just fishing out in the open. And we have a lot of like hard flat bottom here, so I'm gonna eliminate the openness and try to get closer to some kind of structure and maybe see if that's where the bait's going to hang out today.
All right, man. I almost feel like I'm grilling you because I still have more questions. I'm into this. All right, so 2 questions. First one is, if you're not just beelining for the shoals or beelining for an AR, and you're more observant as you're going out, hoping to see something, like, what does that pace look like? Is that on plane, not quite on plane? And then my next question is, because I don't want to forget this, if I am seeing Spanish or I'm seeing bluefish, is that a very consistent false albacore cohabitator, or their presence means they are less likely to be around?
I would say that their presence is not always a guarantee that you're going to see albies, but it is definitely they're going to be on the same bait. So on those really rough days where, and then back to your comment on the pace, it's going to come down to what are the conditions. If there's not much wind, if it's pretty out, then I'm liable to just take my time. I'm in no rush. If I see fish, and if it's not even target species, if it is with bluefish or if it's Spanish and they're working on the bait I know I'm looking for, I'm gonna conserve that energy, and I'm gonna hang around that bait until I see something maybe more productive, or just eventually give up, ready to move on to something else. But not to say necessarily that they are always going to co-inhabit, but they're trying to eat the same thing. So it is a good indicator if that's what you're looking for.
Right on. And now I have another question. And look at this. This is great. So aside from, of course, safety considerations, is there weather out there or conditions out there, aside from safety, that you're just thinking like, these are the conditions where I don't really get excited about my chances of false albacore, not necessarily comfort, but my chances, versus what are the conditions that really get you excited? Like, man, I think it's going to be showtime today.
Yeah, that consistent northeast, not to skip ahead to the exciting part, but where we're at, that's really a lot of what we're looking for. It's going to push all the bait tight to the beach, so that you don't have to go run all over Kingdom Come, burn a tank of gas trying to catch something that doesn't taste all that good, allegedly at least. But otherwise, conditions that are just not ideal is going to be that strong south wind. It does have a lot to do with either safety or comfortability, but it really it dirties the water, it washes the bait around, it makes it really hard to spot for the bait. It gets the schools really spread out, and that's probably the hardest thing about albie fishing is if they're not made up very well, you could spend all day chasing after 2 to 3 fish, or I call them onesie twosies, and you're running and gunning. It's not to say that it's not fun, but you're going to probably get frustrated pretty quickly. So those are the kind of conditions that we'll tell folks to hang tight and maybe wait for a break in the blow or better conditions.
All right, you have worked very hard to answer all my questions, so now I'm ready to bring fish into this equation, to bring fish into this discussion. So now we've done it, we've done the work, and we've been patient, we've been observant, and we're seeing some fish, not far, maybe 100 yards, 200 yards out, surfacing. I guess, I'm not quite sure how to proceed here. I guess in general, how are we going to present them? But again, I know that you want to talk about light tackle and you want to talk about flies. So if we're seeing fish surfacing, I guess tell me what that approach looks like. What are the differences between I got a spinner in my hand or I got a fly in my hand?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I want you to fight. I want you to resist the urge to just put her to the pins and blow right through that school of albies. I know you're really excited. I know you want to get that stink silver wet. But if you blow through that school, you're going to spend an hour trying to get him to make back up. So obviously you want to get up there. There's no reason to hurry, no reason to put her on plane. Ease up. You don't have to be super sneaky. This isn't a super spooky fish. Like you're not chasing tailors in 6 inches of water. But that being said, the bait's going to push before the albies do, and their albies are going to follow the bait. That's what they're here for. I'll start with light tackle. So the advantage of light tackle is, and if you don't mind, I brought a little show and tell example with me today.
Please.
Hopefully it comes up on screen pretty well. This is just your average sting silver. This is, sorry, let me just reference this. Yep, this is a 3/8 ounce. This is, I don't think it's the smallest one they make, but this is really the smallest that you're going to go for, especially this time of year. For reference, that might be 2 inches in length. It's just shiny. It's got an eye on it. It's got a treble hook. Personally, I'd probably recommend. You're only going to get a couple uses out of the factory hooks. There's a couple brands that make these. But the advantage of this is that on a light tackle, you can cast this a country mile. So you don't have to get right on top of the school. You can get 20, 30 yards away from the school if you're confident with your spinning gear. And you're going to want to cast in the school or ideally past the school. The reason for doing so is you want to maximize your opportunity because you're going to bounce this off a couple of those. We call them mercury missiles because they're just like fired up, ready to chew on anything. They're ferocious and chomping at all the bait, and so it's going to take a minute for something to see this. So casting it short of the school, expecting to pick something off of the school is a little bit unrealistic. So either in it or past it. And then I like to give it a good 3 to 5 second count. Everybody kind of tests their patience on that, even myself included. First school of the day, you want to get hooked up, but give it that couple second count because just like an iceberg, that bait is deeper, those fish are deeper, and so get in the middle of the school so you're not just skipping off the surface. That's step 2. Step 3 is you're going to reel this thing like you want to get it out of the water. Like nobody's business. The bait that they're chasing after is swimming for their life. You see it showering out of the water. I'd encourage folks to look up. There's a lot of really awesome guides and photographers in the area that get some awesome macro shots of these teeny little glass minnows coming out with the albies chasing after them. But they're moving quick, and so you need to match that sporadic behavior. So there's no real jig twitch. It's just reel like you're trying to reel your face off, and then hold on tight when you do hook up. Because when they do hook up, that's the missile part of the mercury missile. Is I tell folks it's like hooking into a semi truck going down the side of 24.
All right, I imagine that my podcast people like details, so I follow that sting silver. So let's talk about before we go to fly, let's talk about some of this terminal tackle, and it would be. One question, do you think color matters? Should you have a couple options? 2, what is the leader that you like to use? And do you tie a knot to that where it's like a loop knot that gives it more action, or do you like a cinch knot to it to have perhaps more integrity? And then, what's the usual kind of rod and reel weight that you would put in my hand if I got on your boat to chase them?
Yeah, all great questions. So I'll start with, you mentioned color. Color can definitely make a difference. Again, we're trying to match the hatch wherever possible, but above color, I'd say size. If what you're throwing is especially larger than what the bait is, you'll have a hard time getting bit. Not so much on the smaller side, because everything looks like a nail to a hammer in the albie world. But particularly if you're throwing jigs that are larger than the bait, you're gonna have a hard time. Next, besides size, would be color. Anything super flashy like this silver. A lot of colors you'll see white with a gold or a silver stripe down the middle. Those glass minnows they call them glass minnows because they're clear, and then they have a little bit of color running right down their bloodline in the center. So anything to match that pattern from a color perspective, like your natural tones, clear will work as well. A lot of people are doing enamel jigs now with a lead core to give it that stripe and to give it the weight. Moving up, terminal tackle closer to the tip. I like fluoro, 20 to 30 pound, depending on the size of the fish. You can get away with 20 pound early season when you have what we call them the little football albies. Their teeth are very abrasive, like everything else in the mackerel and tuna family. So you're not going to necessarily get clipped off like you would with a king or a Spanish, but it'll wear through that fluoro after the first couple fish. We tend to try to go through the 20 and 25 like good sports until we break down and just put the 30 fluoro on. As far as knots go, I prefer what we call the perfection loop, which gives you just like a 1/4 of an inch offset from the eyelet to the leader itself. I think it just allows the jig to swim a little bit more true. That being said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing like your typical fisherman's knot cinched down right to the eyelet. You'll see in this sting silver here, it's got a molded in eyelet. These are not quite as friendly to your leader as maybe a swivel would be. And in that instance, I'd say you might actually be better with that loop because you've got less friction down to the end of the knot. But there are a lot of options for jigs. So it really depends on what tackle I was throwing.
And you usually have what, a 3,000 or a 4,000? Like, are you allowing for a run or?
Yeah, I mean, our whole goal is to have fun there. So I'd say anything 2,500 to 4,000 series. As they get bigger, you start to get to the 15, 20, 25 pound albies, so the real studs. We'll go with like a medium heavy or like a true medium action rod. But also, with some of the gear that we're running, maybe not quite a trout pole. Some of these albies will do some pretty serious damage to your tackle. Like on the fly side, a lot of people say that Cape Lookout is where 8 weights go to die, which would be the equivalent of like a medium heavy for light tackle. So I would say on average medium heavy, with a 2,500 to 4,000 series, depending on the rod.
Okay, man, let's switch over to a fly focus, but instead of approaching, let's go with the fly gear, and then tell me about how you would approach with someone in the bow of the boat with the fly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the average go-to, even though I just said it's where 8 weights go to die, I think the go-to is going to be an 8 weight. I think ideally, just for action standpoint, you probably want something that's 2-piece or 1-piece. I say that knowing that most of the rods we use are 4-piece. You just tend to get a little more structure out of a monolithic built rod. That being said, we're going. I prefer to use sinking line regardless of what the bait and the fish are doing with like a nice heavy weighted line, and that's solely for the reason that most of the time, like we talked about conditions earlier, this time of year it's mostly just blowing all the time. It doesn't matter where it's blowing out of, it's usually just blowing. And so for ourselves, for our own sanity, and then for the sake of our clients, we want to make sure that they can get that line out. It's not very often you're making hero casts, but 40, 50 feet away from the boat, we usually do the trick. And so that forward shot of a cord line or a heavy weighted fly line is going to really help folks cast either into the wind or adjacent to the wind, or even downwind to let it carry that downwind shot.
So what do you like to put in the end? Like what are some of your go-tos to tie on?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I've brought another example with here me today. This is a synthetic version of what we use for a clouser. It's not wet, so you won't get the full effect, but you can imagine as this gets wet, all all the fringe kind of comes together, and I don't know if that sheen's coming through or not. But again, we're really just trying to match the hatch for those glass minnows. Um, Clouser's the typical design that most folks go with. Another really good one is a gummy minnow, which is just a um, some kind of rubber resin poured stretchy. It's like a soft plastic, but for fly fishing. Both are super effective. The gummy minnows, they're almost pretty much disposable, one time use. But they work very well. They look very, very realistic in the water. So does the right tide fly. That being said, if you get like a true bucktail fly, that they hold up to those really abrasive teeth a little bit better than something like a synthetic or a gummy minnow. But those three right there are going to be our main go-tos. You could get away with more, but you really don't need anything else. That's exactly what's going to work for you, 10 times out of 10 almost.
So if I'm talking to you about chartering you for a fly fishing trip to False Albacore, is that a number you'll throw out? Is it like, hey man, can you cast 40 to 50 feet? Is that part of what needs to happen to be successful?
That's a great question. So we definitely try to gauge experience to make sure that we can do the best we can to guarantee success. A lot of that is just defining success. Under no conditions, unless we know we're bringing a repeat client or a really seasoned Albie vet on board, we almost always bring light tackle in the event that the weather's just not doing it. I still have plenty of days myself where the flying line is not just doing it. You're getting caught up in the straps on the cooler. You're stepping on your line, or you keep losing your line. It's just, I mean, fishing is definitely a patient man sport. Fly fishing, I think, tests that a little bit more. So that being said, that is definitely one of the criteria. We're not vetting anybody, keeping anybody from joining us, but it's something that we try to do to help set expectations. And also, we're more than happy to help do a little bit of demonstration ahead of time or on the boat, depending on the conditions.
All right. So as far as approaching a surfacing school with fly rod, like if you're given the choice, if you're in control of that, then I'm up in the bow and ideally the wind is blowing what direction with me in the bow? Like to my back, to my side? Like what's the, even if I'm somewhat confident and I'm honest about my skills, what's ideal?
In either scenario, fly or light tackle, most ideally, I'm going to be up ahead of the school. The school's going to be downwind. You're going to be casting downwind. That's going to be the best opportunity for us to drift. So we're not pushing the fish too hard with the boat. And it's going to give, especially if there's multiple people on board fishing, it's going to give multiple opportunities to pull fish out of that school. It's going to be easier for you to cast. You can really zing that thing down past the bait ball. And it's just less resistance. You're not worried about, a 3/8 ounce metal thing coming, slinging back at you, or you're not worried about the wind sending the fly back to your fishing buddy in his ear. Usually folks don't appreciate that, but that is the most ideal setup. It's obviously not how it always works. The next best idea would be perpendicular to, so you can cast side to the wind, especially for fly fishing. For our more advanced folks, casting in the wind is a non-issue, but just out of respect of just technique and patience, we try to set people up where we're ahead of the bait ball and we're fishing with them instead of chasing them.
So on the fly, I get that fly out. I get it out 40 to 50 feet. What's my action?
Again, most of the time we are going to use that sinking line. So you're going to give it that same 3 to 5 second count. It's definitely not going to sink at the same rate as your typical jig, just because we're using mostly braid with that fluoro leader. And so that braid and that fluoro has almost no resistance for the surface tension of the water. But that fly line actually takes a second to break the surface tension. So you might be closer to a 5 second count. And at that point, I wish I brought a fly rod with me, so I'll do my best. You'll have to imagine, but I'm going to tuck that reel under my arm, and I'm going to do a double hand over hand strip is what it's called. And the same thing, I want to get that fly line back to the boat as quick as possible. Most important thing is light tackle. your reel very neatly puts all of your line stacked on your spool back for you. But when you're stripping a fly line, you're dumping it all ideally back in the boat, either in a basket or a tray, or a mat that has little fly line grabbers. A lot of times, even on our boat too, we don't usually do a basket just because it's so windy. It doesn't usually stay. But you're just minding your feet, so you want to put the line in between your feet, try not to step around a lot. As best as you can, obviously, right? I know it sounds like a lot, but while you're stripping as fast as you can, and you're trying to get these angry little mercury missiles to bite your fly, bend your line in between your legs. Once you're hooked up, try to fight the urge to what we call trout set. Pull that rod tip straight out of the water. Keep your rod tip down and start to feed, because when they grab it, they're going to grab it so quick, and that the hook is almost always going to go right perfectly in the corner of their mouth. And you're going to feed. You're going to pay that fly line out until you get to the point where you're ready to go back and fight them on the reel.
I follow that, man. I think that was a good description. And so,
if you don't mind, I could add one more thing as far as the approach
Please.
too. Just some like industry tips and knowledge. As everybody goes out there, I definitely look forward to more people exploring the fishery, and there's a lot of fun to be had. But being cognizant of the fact that there are multiple disciplines fishing at the same time, and so being respectful of folks who are fishing or who are fly fishing. If you see somebody struggling to get a cast on a bait ball, don't send your stink silver right across their fly line, and I guess as much as possible as far as etiquette goes. I'd say that's one other thing I'd add for the approach.
that brings up good as far as protocol goes. So if a boat is working a school of albacore, we'll take fly out of it. I get that that's a different beast. If a boat's working it and we're light tackle too, certainly we're green lighted to work the same school. It's not like there isn't ownership out there, is there?
No, I would say I'd say you'd be hard pressed to find that. Most folks are what I talked about earlier, taking your time, not blowing right through the middle of the bait ball. That's going to get you all the respect in the world, and more often than not, you'll find folks make room, or especially amongst all the captains that are out there at the same time. Like, we're always chattering to each other on the radio, or just hollering across from boat to boat, like, hey, they're over here, I got the bait underneath my boat. So no, it's definitely it's not a hostile environment in any way, shape, or form. It's just very fast action, fast pace. Sometimes it's like the running gunning aspect. We have people usually all the way forward on the bow with their knees kind of planted into the gunnel to hold on tight. So that's where, as the captain, as the angler, that's where that take a second just to slow down is what makes all the difference in the world.
All right, next line of questioning has to do with, I'm going to go back to spinning now. So not your seasoned vets, not your regulars, but people who are relatively new to experiencing this fishery. We've gotten them to the point where they're putting their stilling silver in the right spot, and they've gotten hooked up, and line is peeling off. One question I had actually on the side is how light or how heavy do you like to set the drag on your spinner? But my main question is, in general, from your vantage point of a guy that takes out people who might be new to this, what's the main mistake or mistakes someone might make after they're hooked up?
I would actually say, you just mentioned the drag, right? So I would say doing too much drag, trying to fight the fish too hard, especially using light tackle. That's how you break things. That's how you pull the leader. That's how you pull the hook. I talked about these jigs. A lot of these factory treble hooks on the jigs are not the strongest. These false albacore, pound for pound, are some of the hardest fighting fish that we see, at least in their class. So it's nothing for them to straighten these little steel hooks out. So I would say trying to fight the fish too hard, not taking the time to fight it out. And that's where all the fun is at, is being bent over for 15, 20 minutes, listen to your drags rip, hoping you don't blow the seals out of that little 2,500 that you maybe should have left at home. The second thing I would say is getting the fish to the boat. Definitely want to have a good net. We've been in plenty of situations where you have to wing it. You gotta grab the fish by the tail fork, and just like anything else in their class, they do that head shake. So they're messy. They're gonna beat everything up. Light tackle, fly. They're gonna make a big mess. They're spitting the glass minnows everywhere. They're tangling your line. But getting that fish to the boat, they're going to go for your running gear. They're going to go for your trim tabs. They're going to go for anything that you think is not good to keep that fish hooked up. It's just I think they know. So that's where instead of this is all going to depend on circumstances, right? And I keep coming back to the take your time, slow down thing, but it really is the difference in like the cradle to grave experience, like finding the fish, hooking up, and getting it in the boat, get your picture, send them back on their way, or take them home, make dinner, to each their own. But getting in a good place on the boat. So instead of trying to boat that fish closer to the stern, get it on the bow, get it away from anything that's going to pull it loose, anything that's going to make you have to retie your gear on. And then obviously if you've got a net, highly recommend it.
So you recommend the net, not like the tail grab?
Your chances of success are going to go up significantly.
I believe it. Hey, anything in that conversation that isn't covered if I apply the same question to fly and mistakes that people make after being hooked up on the fly?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier setting the hook on the fly. A lot of people want to organically pull back to set the hook up. You should keep your tip pointed down and let that fish run with the hook to let it set itself. And then again with your line management. Sometimes we get lucky. We cast our whole line out and you have almost no slack and you get bit before you even finish your second strip. So you have no mess in the boat or at your feet or hanging over the side of the boat. But you don't always get lucky. So mending your line, taking your time to pay it out to instead of trying to muscle that fish with the fly line in your hand, taking your time to get the line back to the reel and bring that fish bring the fish to the point where you can fight it on the reel, and then everything from that point out is almost identical. I mean, your fighting style is going to be a little bit different on a fly rod where you don't have that full length butt that you can put into your hip or put into your forearm. A lot of times we take the butt of a fly rod, put it in your palm, or you can tuck it into your midsection area to make up for that lack of leverage on the lower grip of a light tackle. But I mean, really, yeah, as far as getting the fish to the boat, they're about the same.
All right, I think I got one more line of questioning before I want to ask you about the Cape Lookout, Albacore, and Red Drum Festival. So my last line of questioning would be, again, this is being released in early October, and that's typically the start of the heat of the season. And it would be, and those fish usually stick around how long? How long of a window do people typically have to get in on the fall? And if it's just not working for someone this fall to fit it into their calendar, they saw this and they got excited, but they just can't make it happen, then typically what would be the best time frame in the spring for them to try to put it on their list?
Yeah, all great questions. So I mentioned earlier the season can start as early as September. We've been seeing that this year. They're not what we would call made up yet. It's not big schools with lots of bait. It's schools of a couple dozen here and there, but we're still catching them. And then that season can run all the way to, there's been times where up to Thanksgiving where we're still catching schoolie albies at the Cape or off the beach. But really typically on average, it's like the last week of September to the second week of November. And then you may find that there's a peak somewhere in there between. That's going to depend a lot on water temps, wind, what the weather's doing that year, which as we know, it changes kind of year over year.
And the fall is more predictable, but if someone only had the spring as an option, when would you tell them to really start trying to pay attention to fishing reports, social media?
Probably March, April timeframe, about when the bonita show up. And again, really that would be, the fishery is almost identical. The difference being that I would highly encourage you to eat the bonita versus the false albacore, but like you will still catch albies mixed in, just like you'll still find the bluefish, you'll still find the Spanish. That's one of the beauties being where we are. There's pretty much always something to go and catch.
All right, now I want to give you the stage to talk about the Cape Lookout, Albacore, and Red Drum Festival. Man, it's a great festival, and if it's not what people aren't familiar, like let them know the gist of it, man. What is it all about, and why should they know about it?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, the Albie Fest, more is kind of the nickname we've coined for it, but the Cape Lookout Albacore and Redfish Festival has actually been around for over a decade now. It's throughout the years changed leadership and sponsorship, so to speak. But that being said, we really opened back up full swing in 2021, and since then we have We've kicked off with our own nonprofit. We still work with a couple of other partner nonprofits, but we kicked off our own nonprofit, the Cape Albacore Foundation, run by all a mix of local captains and local very active members of the community. And the premise of really what we're trying to do, other than raise awareness and support conservation and educational efforts around this fishery, is to work with our veteran partners on the local bases throughout North Carolina to get some of those folks from the Wounded Warrior Battalions and even just retired folks out to experience fly fishing as a whole, but also this like kind of crazy, fast-paced saltwater fly fishing that we have here at the Cape, and to build a camaraderie around that, and to get them into the sport, to get them into the education, to help build a community for them, and under a mutual love for going and getting salty and covered in fish.
So is this basically, I know it's a festival, but is it also a tournament? And is it something that I would enter my boat, or I would sign up and they would put me on a boat?
Great question. So it's a little bit of both. So we have 3-day events. First day is usually a closed event, educational for our veterans that are coming in. We have a lot of our sponsors put on some really awesome clinics for them: tying clinics, casting clinics, conservational education clinics. And then the second day is kind of an open fishing day. We get those vets, they take everything they learned on day one, and they go apply it out on the water. We have a lot of local volunteers that take their own boats to get these vets out on the water. They take their own tackle, their own boats. And then day 3 is the tournament, where again, all profits are put right back into their veteran community and to continue to support this event in years forward. That tournament is open to the public. Registration is open now. We've got our website live. We've got our social media live. And those dates this year are actually October 17th through the 19th.
Right on, man. I'm glad we got to talk about it. Again, I've been a fan of it since before I knew you, and I'm glad it resurfaced. It had like a heyday, and then it seemed to fall out. So happy it's coming back. It sounds like, as it often goes, bigger and better than ever. Captain Tyler Hudgins, this is the end of our conversation on False Albacore. Until we get to the bonus content, what we're going to do after this. But man, thank you so much. You fielded so many questions. We kept the pace up. I mean, you gave a lot of information because we kept the pace up, and that was fun, man. I'm excited for False Albacore.
I think it was a lot like albie fishing, fast paced, running the mullet. I appreciate it.
So I hope it has that same effect on people that watch this,
Absolutely.
Release. But right now I'm going to go to David, man. Thank you very much, Tyler.
Likewise. Thank you.
Hey, Gary.
Hey, David. Welcome back.
There was a lot to False Albacore that I was not aware of.
Well, yeah, man. I told you I get excited about this. And you just want to talk about whether or not people eat them.
Well, I do. In the bonus content, I'm going to ask him about the recipe because I know he knows. I know he knows a good one. I know he knows a good one. But looking back on what he was talking about, if I was going out there in my own boat, looking for terns and gulls, diving for bait, it's sort of a lot like the Spanish mackerel fishing. It kind of reminded me of a little bit like that. In the same way you cast past the school of fish, and then you reel it as fast as you can.
Yeah, as fast as you can. To try to almost feel like you're getting it away from them. It's great, man. It's high energy. So that's your best takeaway?
So yeah, I think that would be my best takeaway. Is real fast.
Real fast. That's a good takeaway.
Real fast.
Tyler would approve. I think he would approve of that takeaway.
But I wanted to thank our sponsors before we head out: Port City Signs and Graphics, YourBoatMoney.com, and Marine Warehouse Center.
Yeah, man, I'm proud of the ones we have. Again, I think they all add to the community, and proud to partner with them. Proud to have them supporting our efforts here. And I hope those of you that are watching the podcast and appreciate the podcast, be sure to thank our sponsors for making it possible.
And if you'd like to sponsor the podcast, just contact the Fisherman's Post office, and we will hook you up.
And if you're interested in premium membership, if you're interested in podcast benefits, early release, and bonus content, check out the website for that too.